Welcome.
Hi,
Love
guys. Welcome back to the show. So, this is actually a really cool episode. It's episode 75. It's like our little golden jubilee birthday.
Yeah.
So, what better way than to spend it with two of my very, very good friends, my girl Alessia, and then my friend Stephanie, who we have actually made a really nice relationship here in Florida since she moved and I moved, and we've got some similar interests. So, I'm excited to have her share with you. So, Steph, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about who you are, what you do, what your area is, and then we can dive right into the good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a licensed clinical professional counselor, licensed mental health counselor, clinical mental health counselor. It just depends on the state. I'm licensed in four of them. It's the same title, just kind of diced every way. So I'm licensed in Idaho, South Carolina, Florida, and Utah. And my specialties are narcissism, narcissistic abuse, burnout, and perfectionism, which all kind of go together. And while we don't necessarily treat narcissism, you kind of have to really understand narcissism to understand narcissistic abuse. So those are the things that I treat every day. That's my entire caseload. And then that caseload, honestly, is a copy and paste of most of my clients. They come in and they look very similar and they present very similarly and they have a lot of crossover. And so that's what I'm seeing daily and starting some groups this summer. So been in private practice for 8 years. Yeah.
Wow, that's so amazing. And I think this is really great timing just in the social climate that we're in where, narcissism is becoming a buzzword. So, do you care to share a little bit of your professional definition and what makes actual narcissism and narcissistic abuse different from some of the, pop kind of psychology that we're hearing around all the
Yeah. I think narcissistic abuse is somewhat of an umbrella term. I think it often gets kind of misunderstood for narcissistic personality disorder. And while that exists, and even the APA is not really clear on what that looks like, as they're kind of coming out with alternate ways to look at that diagnosis. What we're really looking at is a pattern of coercive control. We're looking at really it's my needs over your needs. So if our needs align, okay, we're great. But when our needs don't align, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you meet my needs. And so it's an incredibly draining kind of relationship. But we know narcissism really exists on a spectrum. So pop culture, a lot of people are like, oh, you're being narcissistic. Okay, selfishness and entitlement exist on and on this spectrum, but that's like the low, low, low end, going all the way up to NPD and even psychopaths and sociopaths, right? Most psychopaths and sociopaths are going to be narcissists. Not every narcissist is going to be a psychopath or a sociopath, but it's going to be on that whole continuum, even the malignant narcissist. So you're going to see the people that kind of show up at the airport and stomp their feet that, they're not getting certain benefits or perks or like, don't you know who I am kind of behavior, all the way up to people who are very exploitative, very gaslighty. And we could kind of talk about like, what are the key red flags that you're going to see? But it's a pattern of behavior of manipulation and taking advantage of another person.
Yeah, so I guess my question when I hear you talk is, like what Gabby said, it's very much the word that I think right now people just throw around, right? So how would you tell somebody to distinguish? You hear a lot of people, especially, when your relationship's in a bad place, right? And we use the word gaslighting a lot now, right? So it's
Yes.
like, oh, my partner is gaslighting me when correct me if I'm wrong, because sometimes when you're in like that dance with a person, you do defend yourself. You do say like, no, this is how it went. You use verbiage like that, which you're not maybe meaning to be gaslighty. So how
Mhm.
would you help somebody look at what stuff that maybe is unhealthy but normal, where it's like maybe that person doesn't mean to, but that's something we can work with,
Right.
versus, okay, here's this person that's using it as a manipulative tool because they know they can actually get what they want.
And I think gaslighting itself is widely misused. Even what you're describing, like, that's not what I remember, that's not what happened. That's not gaslighting, right? Because gaslighting is really it's a behavior that's incredibly it comes from this like 1940s movie from like the 1800s where basically he starts like hiding and moving things and like this frame will disappear and he's like, you don't remember that? You must have clearly you're crazy, like you've moved it. So it's a it's kind of like setting you up to then feel crazy. So in modern times, what that might look like I've got clients where the keys may go missing and they're looking everywhere and the keys are not where they left them. And then that person's like, "You're crazy," but they're hiding the keys. I've seen that as like pots and pans and forks and like random kitchen stuff will disappear. And they're like, "I can't find it anywhere." And I've even had a client find them like in a tote under the hunting stuff in the garage. "You're crazy. Clearly you must have forgotten what you did with them." So it's a very specific behavior that they're intending to make you feel crazy by this behavior. It's not just we have different perspectives and we see it differently. And it's not, "Oh, I'm gonna lie and say that that didn't happen." That's misleading, that's lying. And those are a lot harder, I think, misunderstandings. But gaslighting is widely misused, and I don't see that as often as people definitely throw it out.
Okay. So, I mean, I agree. And I remember when you educated me about where the term came from, which,
Yeah.
really helps me remember specifically, okay, this is a severe intentional pattern of behavior, right? And I do think that it makes it easy to confuse what's sort of normal conflict in a relationship and maybe disagreements and misalignments versus this is a pathological thing. So, I know we've sort of worked with and been in with people that meet more formal criteria. So,
Mhm.
what I find interesting and frustrating at the same time is to someone who's never been through it, how do you
Mhm.
explain? Like, you just don't get it because you really haven't been there.
Yeah, and I think so many family and friends come in and they're like, "How do I tell them to like get out of this relationship?" But a lot of my clients, I'll explain it to them as kind of like gambling disorder, where you're sitting in front of a slot machine and the jackpot at the top is kind of whatever it is they presented to you, the picket fence, like, "This is this amazing human being that I can be, and this is the life that we can have together." And so you sit down and you invest and you invest and you invest, and it's an intermittent reward system. And just as you're about to leave, it's going to pay out. And you get that ding, 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 ding. And you're, "Oh, finally, they're going to be that person that I need them to be." And that kind of cycle is very much like addiction. And so when people are like, "Oh, the trauma bond, what does that mean?" It's it's really that. There's endorphins, there's serotonin, there's relief. Finally, they're going to be who I thought they are. Finally, they're changing. But that's the manipulation itself as well, because they do hear you when you say, "This is what I need," and they will show it to you when they know that you're about to leave. And so you know that that's the manipulation because they're going to deny that that's important. They're going to do the narcissistic prayer. They're going to do all these things. And then all of a sudden, and they have this weird sixth sense. And I don't know what it is. There's no science behind it, but they know when you're about to withdraw. And you'll see them use every skill in their basket and they'll layer them up and they'll do whatever they can to bring you back under control. And it's very foggy. It's very confusing. And it's so hard for people to get away. And typically there's a moment and we call it the shelf. And so you have all these like paper cut moments of like this horrible thing that they said to me, but do I want to argue with them? Nope, I'm going to put it on the shelf. And really that person has to get to the point where all of those things that have built up, finally they're going to put that last thing on there that's going to break the shelf. The weight is going to kind of come tumbling down. And it's when that person experiences that shelf, they can't unsee it anymore. And it kind of breaks the fog, it clears things out. And they have to get to that point before they're going to leave. And even then, it could still be a long time of like actually trying to get out and do so safely. But, it's you have to wait for them to get there and you have to
Yeah,
be able to
I
with them.
I I love that you brought the slot machine up because I think that's a really pretty well-known analogy for what intermittent reinforcement looks like and why it's so
Mhm.
powerful. But another buzzword is this trauma bond idea. And I think what is really difficult for people to understand when they haven't been in that is that, yes, you can be hurt to such an extent that you reach to leave and then you're rewarded again, you stay in it, you give it another chance. But then you learn that you're not only pursuing positive things, but you're trying to prevent the negatives from happening.
Yes.
And it stops becoming, oh, well, we're working towards the same thing. We're both happy. It's, I need to keep you happy now because
Yeah.
it's less dangerous and it's less negative and hard on me. And that I feel like at that point, that's when the trauma bond is hardest
Yeah.
to break because every small glimmer that you have is now huge. Oh, I worked for this. I avoided another negative. This is great. We're going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. And at that point, it's difficult to see, oh, well, the negatives are really bad now because the little
Yeah.
things seem so good.
Absolutely, and there's so much guilt there, right? So we have fight, flight, freeze, and appease, right? So freeze, I'm not gonna make a decision. Oh my gosh, I'm never gonna move forward. But we also see a ton of appeasing. Some people call it fawning. A lot of people think that's more predatory language, and so they prefer appeasing. But appeasing is, I'm gonna make you happy so that I lessen my abuse. And that doesn't feel genuine. It's gonna feel totally off for the person. I'm gonna tell you what you want to hear, but I'm not gonna be able to share what I really feel. And I'm doing so, yeah, like you said, to avoid the abuse. And then that feels that you feel guilt ridden, and that's going to affect your self esteem, and all those things are going to come up as a result, which again makes it harder for you to leave.
Yeah, so I'm curious from your perspective, like a client comes in to you, right? And logically, I think, that's the thing. You're working with a lot of people who logically even might know, like, I know this is bad. You hear even people say, like, I know X person that I'm with is narcissistic,
Mhm.
but like, I know, I just am having trouble leave. So
Yeah.
say somebody hits your office and they're like, Stephanie, like, I know this is horrible, but like, I can't leave right now.
Mhm.
I think this is the question we get a lot. Like, what are we working on?
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of times, and like I've had a client tell me, and it saddens me to hear this because obviously I know what it feels like too. When it's like, I hate coming in here every week being like, I know the solution is
Mhm.
just to get out of it, but now I'm just coming here because I'm struggling and I don't know
Mhm.
how to get out of it. And like, how do you bring hope to those clients when they're like, I'm going to keep coming to you while I'm in this relationship, even though I know it's fucked up?
Well, and some of that is strategy, right? So we're going to identify what are the barriers to you leaving. A lot of times it's going to be some sort of financial abuse where they don't have access to money, they've been a stay-at-home mom. Sometimes the narcissists themselves may actually just be unemployed and kind of squatters, and we just cannot get them out. So what are the barriers, and can we start to work towards that? I've worked with some people kind of like as stay-at-home moms, like, okay, we're getting you employable, we're getting you a job so you can be somewhat self-sufficient. We're going to work on safety plans. Okay, so when things do escalate, when does it escalate to that level where we really have to implement these safety plans? Because if you withdraw and you know you want to withdraw, they're going to pull out like I said, they're going to pull out every tactic in the book. And if that doesn't work, if they know that you're still pulling back at that point, that's when you're going to see the escalation of abuse where you may say things you've never seen before. And a lot of my clients come in, they're like, well, they've never hit me. There's never been physical abuse. And I'm like, that doesn't mean that there won't be. They've been able to control you through non physical means. But when those means no longer work, that's when you see the escalation. That's why leaving is the most dangerous. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to regulate that. We're going to help them to continue to identify kind of what you asked earlier, like what's unhealthy, what's abuse. So we're going through that and we're helping them to understand what are the tactics, what are the manipulation tactics so you can see them clearly. They stop working. We might, depending on what it is, like a lot of times people try to leave and then their partner might say, well, I'll just kill myself. Okay, so we're going to kind of untangle that. That's not your responsibility. Here's kind of our next steps. I always recommend, so call the police. I don't care what they say. If they really need the help, help's on the way. If they don't, they know that you're not messing around. And that's not a way you can manipulate them in the future, right? So we're coming up with the strategies of safety and removing barriers and building skills, building their sense of self, identifying their own needs that have been really buried for so long. So we're doing values, we're doing needs, we're going back to the basics. Most of my clients have stopped really taking care of basic needs like food, water, sleep. So we start there. We regulate the nervous system. So there's actually a ton of stuff that we can do and a ton of goals that we can work on even before they're actually physically ready to leave and actually get out.
Yeah. And I think to add to that too, boundary setting with someone who perpetrates that kind of abuse is really difficult and it can be scary because again there's that risk of escalation, which is why, like you
Right.
said, leaving is the most dangerous boundary you can set. And with that in mind, I think it's important to talk about, like you said, safety, but how
Mhm.
do you set boundaries that are going to keep you safe ultimately and allow the abuse to continue in one way or another. So, maybe just describing a little bit what that could look like and how many ways they sort of invade your personal space and set limits with how
Mm.
you communicate with others. I mean, that is abusive. And I think a lot of people don't recognize that
Mhm.
being isolated from people you love and having your hobbies taken away from you and your
Mhm.
free time taken away from you and your sleep taken
Yeah.
away from you is abusive behavior.
Mhm.
So, do you work with your clients to sort of acknowledge like the things that trigger you and the things that are hard and make you most upset? Like, yeah, someone not letting you sleep is a way that they control you and the way that they,
Yeah.
harm you.
Right, and those are some of the easiest boundaries to set, but boundary setting with manipulative people is not the same as boundary setting with healthy people, right? And so you can go and take a boundary class and like, why isn't this working? And we're going to learn about that. We might kind of get to know the flavor of your narcissist a little bit to kind of understand like how can we set boundaries that are going to be effective. Sometimes if they're kind of like the rescuer and they really want to kind of come in as the hero, we might frame something like instead of stop doing that, in which they're going to immediately be like, oh, yeah, we might say, oh, I'm trying to do this thing and here's how you can really help me. Like, I really need your help. That's the only way I can do it. So we kind of might frame it a certain way. We might start with things like basic needs. We might automate boundaries. A lot of times, like the phone is a mechanism of abuse all the time. And if you're at that point where the phone rings and you're immediately like, right, we might change your notification settings. We might silence some notifications where they feel like they need that access. And they'll typically do the like back to back messages or back to back calls or the huge, long, big paragraphs. And then you see that and you're immediately dysregulated. So those triggers are really big. So we might be able to regulate like scheduled summaries in iPhone or like turning off notifications, blocking certain people. So there's a lot of things that we can do to start that where you don't have to go to them and verbalize every boundary that you're going to set. But we might start to limit their impact. And I regulate that by saying, you have basically sat down with a chess master, grandmaster, right? And you're just now realizing that you're playing this game that you don't know anything about. And a lot of times my clients, like I've had clients up to 76, right? So they're talking about people that have had almost 80 years of experience manipulating other people. They're going to outmaneuver you. They're going to be better at the game than you. Your power is getting up from the table, not playing the game. And they're going to do everything they can to make you sit back at that table. But as long as you're at that table, and some people stay at that table knowing I got to get my kids to 18, or, there's a lot of reasons I'm not quite ready. I haven't gotten a job yet. So if we're playing that at that table, regulating that you're not going to win everyone, they're going to manipulate you, they're going to outmaneuver you, and that's okay. You are the novice. But knowing that at some point when you get up from that table, that's your power, is I'm not playing the game. And that's what we're trying to get the person to.
I like
Mm.
that everything you just said, I love it. I think it's even me, I was, like, feeling when you were talking because it's like I think what's sad about when you mentioned the game, right? Because it's true when you were like, "Wait, I didn't sign up for this game, but, like, now I know I'm in it, but, like, now I'm in the game, and how do I get out?" And I think what's sad about that is when you gave the love bombing tactics to bring you back in. I would say, like, Gabby, we've mentioned this, like, when you have, like, a good moral compass and you are an empathetic person, I think that can, work against us because we're like, okay, like it's really hard to think that a person would be playing that shitty of a game. And that love bombing comes in. You're like, wait, maybe we're not playing. Maybe we can kind of get into my game because and then it gets like confusing. I think that's the confusing thing that starts to happen that keeps you in it. So I love when you said like, how do I maybe get confident in the game I wanna be in and then see if it's, like, very much distorted from the game that's actually happening.
Yeah, and I think it's really important too to recognize that it's okay to so I use the rule of 3 for boundary setting. If I tell you and we work on very explicit language, but your behavior is harming me, right? Like in no uncertain terms, what you're doing is not okay, it's harming me. And I give them a rule of 3. As empathetic people, we'll give them chance after chance, they're growing, they're changing. But if I tell you you've harmed me and you do it again, okay, here's kind of your buffer of sometimes we have automatic behavior we need to work on. But if I tell you again that you are harming me with your behavior, please stop, right? And they do it a third time. At this point, they know that they're harming you and they're choosing to do it anyway. Because we have to learn discernment. Not everybody deserves our empathy. Different than like, not everybody deserves empathy. Everybody deserves empathy, but we have a limited amount of empathy. And so if we give it to everybody all the time, we're going to be depleted, right? And so, yeah, we can start to pull that back and say, yeah, I'm not going to give people unending chances to harm me. And if I've said, stop harming me in no uncertain terms, they're continuing, it does not matter if they mean it. At that point, they do mean it because they know that it hurts you and that you're doing it anyway. And if any of you had said, hey, can you stop doing that thing? It really, really harms me, really bugs me. I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable. And I would feel uncomfortable doing that thing. And that's empathetic people or healthy people are going to feel that way if the relationship is important. Right. And so, okay, that if someone said that was hurting me, you're like, my bad, man. Like, I will work on that. I'm going to be very cautious not to do that again. And so that's where I have the rule of 3. And I try to get them like, you could give them chance after chance, but you're telling them that they're hurting you and they're doing it anyway.
And I mean, I like that. I like that point. And I think the discussion about empathy in this space is really important because we assume that the narcissist doesn't have empathy. They do. They have intact cognitive empathy. They know something is hurting you. They internalize that it's hurting you and they understand it and continue to do it anyway. So when they are empathetic and nice, it's performative. On the outside, they don't do that well, but it's
Right.
purposeful. And
Right.
that's hard. That's hard to understand. You get it, but you're doing it anyway.
Right. And I think that's where people are like, well, and it's not my job to diagnose the people I'm never going to meet. And people get so wrapped up on like, are they truly a narcissist? It doesn't matter because yes, if they're truly a narcissist, brain scans show their brain's different. It functions differently. But if we're really talking about the pattern of behavior where they are harming you, whether they are empathetic towards you or not. And really, that's when I'm like, okay, if they're harming you, at what point do you just step back and get out of their way? Right. And that's when you're getting up from the table or whatever you want to call it. Let's just get out of the way. They're going to continue to do that. So why are you putting yourself in that again and again and again?
Yeah,
Yeah. Go ahead,
I was
Alessi.
gonna say this. I think what can get tricky, like, how do I verbalize this? Is maybe even when you're trying to get out or you're out and like when people from not as abusive toxic relationships start to give you like advice or like start to be like, I know I've been through that too. Like they're trying to empathize, but like, could you maybe speak to that of like, there is a difference. And I know it's like, for example, when somebody's just like, I know I've been cheated on too. And then it's like, it feels very dismissive to like, oh no, like that would be the easy part. Like that is the part that would be like, oh yeah, I got cheated on. Like, not that I want to normalize cheating, but it is a normalized thing in our culture to be like, not a healthy thing. But it's not just that. We're talking about all the emotional abuse under it is the actually detrimental thing in these relationships.
Yeah, I think a lot of times what is missing is it's not always that black and white. If there had been straight abuse, if there had been infidelity, a lot of times, yeah, for a lot of people, that's a hard line. I'm leaving, I'm out. In so many of the things that we put on the shelf are not always considered abuse. They're not always seen the same. They're not always like, well, is that a deal breaker? And so if a client's coming in, they're dealing with friends and family like that, I might have them watch that video, Empathy versus Sympathy by Brene Brown, with like the little bear, and I don't know which creature it is, but he puts the head down in the hole and is like, well, at least, there, you want a sandwich? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's going to drive disconnection. And so it's for the people who you do care about and you want to build, it's also kind of say, hey, that's not helpful. But here's how I might like some support. How can you shape that? If the relationship is important, if it can be healthy, and you're just like, okay, that's a little misguided. Okay, we can guide them and say, look, that's actually not helpful, and there's a lot you don't understand about it, and that's okay. You don't have to. I'm glad that you don't have to. But maybe we don't compare our relationships, right? Maybe we connect in other ways.
Yeah, I think that's a very helpful tool and something that it's just asking for the right kind of support, right? But how would you advise someone who's now maybe out of the relationship to some extent, whether, they're separated or they've left and they're still have some kind of contact or being pursued by this person and, friends and family are like, I saw it, why didn't you see it? That I feel like that is such a hurtful thing when you're already tearing yourself up inside. Like, I sort of did, and now I definitely do. But
Yeah.
now I feel guilt and shame for not recognizing or taking action on it earlier.
Yeah, and that's why we call it kind of the fog, right? You could not see the hand in front of your face until things kind of align where, the straw that breaks the camel's back. But again, a lot of clients, it's like, or if they get out, they're kind of doing the same thing to other people. Like, why don't you see it? I think it's education of just how difficult these situations and how foggy they are and how confusing they are. And the further we get into fight or flight, the less mental capacity we have. We're kind of in that lizard brain. Again, one thing that throws a red flag for me, that typically if you've dealt with one major narcissist in your life, you get through that relationship and you're going to spot others, and you're going to spot other toxic behavior in your family and friends. It often doesn't come out of nowhere. You're going to have kind of a lot of them, and you're going to start to see more, and you're going to come out. And now that you're seeing these behaviors, right? Like, so if someone comes and like, well, why didn't you see that? Ooh, for me, I'm going, whoa, let's look at this relationship here, right? Why is this person guilting me after just getting out? If there's any empathy, why would that even be the phrase? So first, I'm looking at these other relationships, but then again, if it is a healthy relationship, if it is what you want to grow, maybe there's education. And I will say, now there's a lot more movies and books that are starting to show it, in like even in the last 10 years, where before that you didn't see it anywhere. Right. I think Gaston in Beauty and the Beast, maybe as a kid's movie, but even then, like, people don't recognize that as narcissism. And now you're seeing it more in movies and books, mostly because, one, it's a huge issue, but a lot of times when you have a book plot or a movie plot, they're like, let's just get straight to like the peak of like, we're going to get to physical violence because we can kind of see it grow. But I think more and more now, filmmakers are trying to really bring it across. And so people are seeing it more and they go, oh, that's maybe what they experienced. So there's more ways to share that with people and say, "Hey, why don't you go watch this movie? Or if you read this book, you might understand my perspective a little bit more."
So, I mean, I love that. And I think you and I have we've had chats about some of the more recent media that
Mhm.
was pretty difficult to intake and can be really a good way to show people, like, that ick feeling, like that spine tingling. That's what being triggered by something feels like. Like, that's not normal behavior. And can you maybe speak a little bit? I know we're going to wrap up, but can you speak a little bit to, after someone leaves,
Mhm.
how to be ready that the abuse doesn't stop? Because I think that we very often do think, I left, chat case closed. And very often more often than not, it's not the case.
No, post-separation abuse is a big issue, and I think a lot of people are like, "Okay, so I'm out. I want you to take away all my anxiety." And I sometimes have to regulate, like, if your anxiety is attached to post-separation abuse, I'm not gonna regulate you because your body is still on high alert because there's still things happening. And so sometimes it's regulating that, and again, that might be, how do we get creative with furthering limiting communication, or reducing stalking, or how do we co-parent with someone like that? And it might be like, as you go get your court your custody agreement, like being as specific as possible. The more vague it is, the more space for manipulation. So it might be prepping things like that to help them to kind of continue to put as much space as possible between them and that person.
Yes, I agree. And I think on that note too, can you ever change a person like this? We believe that we can when we're in it,
Yeah.
but how would you answer that question for someone who is still holding out hope that it can work and this person can be better?
I think it's not I think we have to examine that belief that it's our job to change someone else, right? It doesn't matter whether it's true or not, because we're not here to determine whether they're a true or not narcissist. There is no definitive test like, oh, blood test, yes, they're narcissists. And I think we get so stuck on that. If they're a true narcissist, okay, truly, if they are a true narcissist, they're saying brain scans are different, so they lack the ability to see things the way that we do, and their prefrontal cortex is different. So then, if we know that, like, similar to autism, we know autism, the brain is different, and we kind of go, okay, they are who they are, and we kind of give them that space. We can do the same here, right? Okay, if we even suspect there may be a narcissist, Let's give them space. They're just going to be who they are, and I'm just going to get out of their way. But we don't even have to determine that. Why is it our job? And that's what we need to probably be looking in is, and why do I feel like it's my job to go make people have a better life or to to make sure that they interact with people better? It's not our job.
Yeah, I like that. It's a hard topic.
It
It's
is.
very it's complex. I
It
think
is.
that's the only word I can use. It's complex.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So before we end, we always like to leave our listeners with some tools, tricks, tools, or anything like that that they can take with them. So
Okay.
if anybody that's listening to this episode was to listen, what is something that you would want to give them to take with them that might just help them really highlight to be aware of?
Well, that's a loaded question. I'm working on a whole workbook full of stuff like that, so it's hard to just pick one. I would say truly very beginning, if you're just listening to this, like really getting started, to help your body regulate for fight or flight, start with making sure you're meeting your basic needs of food, water, sleep. That's typically where I start with every client, and most clients are not meeting all those needs. And if you're in fight or flight, you're probably not as thirsty, you're probably not as hungry, which it just becomes a really nasty cycle. And so I would work on improving those three things, and that's going to help with nervous system regulation and just being able to better handle any of these situations that come up and be able to think more clearly. So I would say that's my bottom line place to start. And then from there, there's a dozen plus things that we can do. But yeah, I'm working on a whole workbook for that. It's like 100 pages, so
Yeah.
there's a
Well,
lot we can do.
I hope eventually when the workbook's finished, you let us know so we can like post it because I think that's a great workbook that a lot of people could benefit from.
It's gonna be 4 parts. The first 2 parts are on my website for download, but eventually, yeah, it's gonna be total over 100 pages. So
Oh, love that. Well,
lots to do.
thank you. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for coming and sharing all your information with us. I know even speaking about this topic, me and Gabby did one by herself, I don't know, last year, and we had people like, thank you. Like, it's just, you feel so alone and like you're crazy in it. And just getting at least stuff like this out is beneficial. So we appreciate you.
Absolutely. On my website too, and I can link to that, is I have a full resource list. People ask me all the time for like what book should I read? Like where should I get good information? And I have kind of a vetted list on my work on my website, and that's free for anybody on my website. So yeah.
Yay. Thanks so much. We will definitely make that accessible to everyone because every resource is something that might open someone's eyes to something they may have been missing or that they might need to move to safety. So, yay. Well, this was really great. Thank you for coming and sharing your expertise with us.
Yeah.
So, any
Having me.
questions for me or Alessia or Stephanie, we can pass them along to her and connect you with her. So, let us know if anything stuck out to you. And we're happy to share all the resources we have because this is a very complex thing.
Yes.
So, as always, thanks for listening, guys. And we will see you next time on the pod.
Bye, guys.